Oke, bersama saya saat ini ada terima kasih sekali lagi untuk teman-teman yang telah bergabung di diskusi online pendidikan, terutama pada kali ini kita akan membahas tentang bagaimana pendidikan inklusif, pengimplementasian atau penerapan pendidikan inklusif, terutama dalam hal bagaimana kita bisa menemukan juara-juara dalam pengimplementasian pendidikan inklusif. Apa yang dimaksud dengan juara-juara dalam pendidikan inklusif? Nanti kita bisa ngobrol lebih dalam. Dan sebelumnya saya ingin perkenalkan diri, saya Muhammad Nuzul, Project Officer dari Ideal Project Save the Children, dan saya juga bersama Els, salah satu technical advisor kita dari Save the Children Swedia, dan kali ini kita akan membahas lebih dalam bagaimana menemukan juara-juara dan apa sih juara-juara dalam pendidikan inklusif kali ini. Dan sebelum sampai ke situ, juga mungkin ada satu video yang akan kita tayangkan sebagai gambaran awal terhadap diskusi yang akan kita lakukan. Okay, thank you for joining with us. I will show them the video that we talked before, so they can have like the picture of our discussion for the
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Ya, kita akan putar sekali lagi untuk teman-teman yang belum menyaksikan dari awal videonya. Ya, itu adalah video yang akan menghantarkan diskusi kita selama kurang lebih 1 jam ke depan. Kita sudah ada sekitar 20 partisipan attendance dan kita masih menunggu karena ada cukup banyak yang meregistrasikan sebagai attendance. Dan teman-teman juga bisa menginvite teman lainnya untuk bisa hadir dalam diskusi kita kali ini. Dan sebelumnya, thank you for joining with us and actually, this topic related to the champion, find the champion in implementation of inclusive education, is the way how I impress. You answer a lot of questions from social worker. I think 3 months ago you come here and they ask a lot of questions related to how to implement inclusive education. We need more capacity building. We need more skill to be inclusive. We need more skill to implement inclusive education. And I impressed the way you answered that question. You answered that to be more inclusive, to implement inclusive education is very easy. Just open your heart and find the champion. So can you, before we talk very deep related to the champion of inclusive education, can you tell to attendants yourself, and then we can talk deeper to the champion of inclusive education?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar, which is very interesting, and I think it's also very timely. I'm Els. I have a few other names, but maybe just Els is enough. I'm the Regional Education Advisor for Save the Children, and I'm based in Bangkok. I've worked for Save the Children for 12 years as an education advisor, and especially focusing on disability inclusive education, and it's very close to my heart. I think it's important, especially now, that we have sustainable development goals that have incorporated inclusion as something that is part of mainstream development. So we're not talking about children with disabilities outside the system anymore. We have to start talking about them, planning for them, financing for them as part of the mainstream system. That's part of our commitments as governments and as organizations for the new Sustainable Development Goals. And I really like the idea that we are going to try to talk a bit about champions today, because we can all be champions.
So yeah, the idea of the champions come up from Els actually, when Els got a lot of questions related to the needs of capacity building or the needs of the skill related to implementation of inclusive education. So could you tell us like very little bit deeper related to what is champion in inclusive education?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I had a little bit of time to think about that. I think we can all be champions. Every individual can be a champion. So you and I could be champions. And it's really somebody, an individual, that successfully promotes something else. And in our case, somebody who successfully promotes the inclusion of children with disabilities in our communities, in our families, in our schools, as part of the mainstream, as part of the whole society. I think a champion can be a bit of a role model, somebody who shows us how we can deal with certain issues. And again, in this case, how we can behave together with children with disabilities, how we can react to them, how we can support them, but sometimes also how we can learn from them. Because having a disability doesn't mean that there are all these things that you cannot do. Children with disabilities have a lot of skills and knowledge that they can do. And sometimes it's the other way around, that children with disabilities are the champions and are telling other children, are telling other teachers what they can do and what value they can bring to the classroom, to the community, to a group of other children. I think it's important to recognize champions and role models. And we need those champions at all the levels. We need them in our families, we need them in the community, we need them in the schools, we need them at the government level. So you see champions in different countries in different ways. I'm responsible for 6 countries in Asia, so I visit those different countries and I see our projects doing this in different ways as well, which I think is very interesting. Sometimes children can be very powerful champions for their classmates who may have disabilities. So it's important to see what they do and what we can learn from them. So we can have a parent that is very strongly advocating for her or his child to go to a mainstream school and maybe offers support to the school to help the teachers how the child can best be supported to learn as good as the child can. I think one issue sometimes is that we look at children with disabilities as a bit like charity, doing charity. So we see that children get donations, they get a wheelchair, and sometimes that wheelchair is much too big for the child, but that's a way that we try to kind of be nice to them. But children with disabilities have rights like every other child. So we need to look at the whole child. A child is much more than just a disability. And that's something what champions know how to do. They look at a whole person. They see that a child, for instance, loves animals and loves traveling and has a favorite food and lives in a family in a rural area, and that child also has a wheelchair to move around. So having a wheelchair and moving around in a wheelchair is just one identity of a child, while the child has many other identities that are also very important if you want to teach that child well.
Yeah, thank you very much for answering. Currently we got very kind of deeper perspective about champion, dan teman-teman juga bisa menanyakan pertanyaan di section komen. Nanti di part ketiga kita akan ada tanya jawab, dan seperti yang tadi Els bilang bahwa champion, juara-juara, kadang juara-juara itu bisa berupa seseorang atau individual yang berhasil membawa suatu nilai atau memperjuangkan suatu nilai, dan kadang juga kita lupa melihat juara-juara yang ada di sekitar kita dengan kapasitas yang terbatas, dengan skill yang terbatas, tapi dia bisa memperjuangkan apa yang menjadi, terutama dalam hal ini, hak-hak anak. Dan champion atau juara yang sedang kita bicarakan dalam konteks pendidikan inklusif ini juga adalah orang-orang yang bisa melihat anak secara keseluruhan, secara komprehensif, tidak melihat anak berdasarkan kekurangannya, tapi juga melihat anak, bagaimana anak ini punya potensi, dan juga anak ini punya hak, termasuk hak dalam bidang pendidikan dan juga perlindungan. Jadi kita akan coba gali bagaimana Els yang bekerja di 6 negara di Asia Tenggara ini atau di sekitar Asia ini bisa menemukan champion-champion, dan kita bisa komparasi sebenarnya juara-juara dalam mengimplementasikan pendidikan inklusif itu juga jangan-jangan ada di sekitar kita gitu, dan kita terkadang lupa untuk melihat itu, dan kita tidak menangkapnya, sehingga ini bisa jadi tidak terkenali atau teranalisis di sekitar kita. So, Els, before go to example of the champion, what do you think the important to find the champion around us?
I think it's important to find champions because what we do in our work as Save the Children are often projects of a few years. And then when a project is ended, then it may happen that nobody thinks about it anymore, unless we have been able to find other people in communities, in families, in schools, in local governments, who want to continue to work around inclusion, who feel that it is part of their role and responsibility. They feel that they want to create a society that respects diversity, celebrates diversity, and brings in children and adults with disabilities into the mainstream society. So finding those champions, those role models, when you have a project ongoing, is important to create more sustainability after the project finishes. So I think it's very important, therefore, also to find them at different levels, not just in the community, but also, for instance, at the highest level, at the government level. And as an example, which is maybe interesting to hear, in Bangladesh, the Prime Minister has a granddaughter who has autism, and she has therefore become a very strong advocate, a very strong champion for the inclusion of children with disabilities in the mainstream communities and mainstream school system. So sometimes it is because people have encountered, have met children and adults with disabilities. It's easier then to become a champion. But sometimes also, especially with children, when you start including children in mainstream schools, and as a teacher, you really try to help every child to understand what it is to have a disability, you can create a lot of champions at that level. Sometimes when a child has a visual impairment and needs to read using Braille, it's very interesting if that child with the visual impairment is explaining to the other children how Braille works, how you can read using Braille. And other children become very impressed that that child can actually read by feeling those dots. So it's a matter of bringing a positive story out about children with different disabilities so that we become more knowledgeable about them, and that's what champions do. Champions are communicating with children with disabilities in a very normal way. So for instance, if you have a classmate who has cerebral palsy and sometimes has drools, then the children just take a tissue and give the child a tissue, and they don't make any fuss about it. So they're just used to that, and they don't bother about it. They know that's part of that impairment, part of their disability, but they know what this child can do, what this child can contribute to the lessons, to the discussions. So they look at what children can do and not what the children cannot do.
Yeah, that's cool. Jadi juga untuk teman-teman bahwa pentingnya mencari atau menemukan juara-juara atau orang yang memperjuangkan tentang pendidikan inklusif di sekitar kita itu juga sangat penting, karena terutama untuk teman-teman yang bergerak dalam bidang pengembangan masyarakat atau juga project, hal ini atau menemukan juara-juara bisa kita jadikan sebagai strategi bagaimana project-project atau program kita bisa berkelanjutan di masyarakat, karena sebenarnya orang-orang yang champion inilah yang akan, orang-orang yang juara inilah yang akan melanjutkan juga perjuangan kita. Els juga tadi sudah memperlihatkan bahwa lapisan-lapisan champion itu tidak hanya dari sisi keluarga atau dari sisi masyarakat, tapi juga bagaimana di Bangladesh pihak pemerintah juga bisa menjadi champion. Jadi sebenarnya balik lagi, champion itu adalah orang-orang yang bisa memperjuangkan, kalau dalam konteks yang sedang kita bicarakan adalah pendidikan inklusif dan hak anak-anak disabilitas. So, can you tell some examples that you have across the world related to the champion, so everybody can start to find the champion around them?
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, different in different countries, and that makes it very interesting. And I've met many champions. Like, for instance, our projects that look at disability inclusion in China, they have linked up with a national singer. She's a famous singer, and she's very interested in supporting the inclusion of children with disabilities. So she is part of all kind of different events, and it's all very nicely covered in the media. So that's one way of finding your champions. You could find sports celebrities or TV celebrities, and you can interest them for your cause of creating more disability inclusive societies and schools. But also, as with the Prime Minister in Bangladesh, I think there are enough champions in our governments as well. I'm sure that people in our local governments at the national level as well, there are some people who really are passionate about disability inclusion. So we need to identify those people and bring them out and let them tell about why they think it's so important that children and adults with disabilities get out in the open. It's interesting how in Indonesia we're talking about inclusive education guidelines and general procedures. So part of that should maybe also be that there is more of a link with disability organizations who can help in our schools, who can help our teachers to become better disability-friendly teachers. We could have champions in terms of teachers with disabilities. In Bangladesh, again, I met a teacher who was blind, but he was teaching in a mainstream school with all seeing children. But it was absolutely incredible to see how respectful the children, this was a grade 6 class, how respectful the children were and how well they were communicating together. In Vietnam, I came across a school where they had included children with hearing impairment. And the teacher told me, I'm not going to point them out to you. I'm not going to tell you who these children are. Try to find them yourself. She was another champion for me because what had she done? She was so enthusiastic about inclusion that she taught all the children in the classroom some sign language and some speech reading. So all the children with and without hearing impairment were signing and speech reading and making noise, and I had no idea who the children with hearing impairment were. She had really included those children, and all the children accepted each other, whatever their disability or not. In Bhutan, I've seen a teacher including children with Down syndrome, children with intellectual disabilities, and recognizing that these children have very strong social skills. So when she wanted to do activities where there was group work needed, she asked those children to make the groups, because those children had a very good understanding of which children would work well together, because they were better socially equipped, they could lead, they could contribute to group work. So she had found the strengths in these children with intellectual disabilities, and they were completely one part of the same class. I have a son with autism myself, and he has had a very difficult education because he's slightly older, so people didn't understand what autism was. But now he is a computer programmer, and he's very clever with that, but he is also having lots of problems with social interaction. But finding the strengths of people with disabilities is what we want champions to do. And I think that's something that we can all help people with. We can all be champions. We can link with children with disabilities and adults with disability. We need to make them more visible and treat them as we treat any other person with respect.
Ya, that's cool. Kita sudah mendengar dari Els bagaimana di beberapa negara di ditemukan beberapa champion atau juara yang juga bisa memperjuangkan tentang pendidikan inklusif. Contohnya di Cina, bagaimana ada seorang penyanyi yang juga memperjuangkan hak-hak anak disabilitas, dan juga di beberapa daerah, di beberapa negara ada juga bagaimana guru-guru ini bisa dengan keterbatasannya, baik keterbatasan gurunya ataupun keterbatasan siswanya, bisa melakukan pembelajaran yang interaktif dan juga berfokus pada potensi yang dimiliki oleh anak daripada hambatan-hambatan atau barriers yang dimiliki oleh anak itu. Jadi Els telah menjelaskan bagaimana secara komprehensif di beberapa negara sebenarnya menemukan juara-juara itu juga itulah yang sebenarnya bisa dilakukan oleh kita dalam waktu dekat ini, karena dengan begitu kita tidak punya alasan lagi untuk bisa mengimplementasikan pendidikan inklusif mulai dari sekarang. So there is no reason to implement inclusive education, right? There is no reason because we already find the champion. We actually have a lot of champion, right?
True. Yeah, and I think it's important to look at what children need, and that has not so much to do with children with disabilities. It applies to all children. Sometimes we say, well, this is a child with a disability, so maybe we shouldn't have the same expectations. But that's maybe not a good thing. I know that a lot of teacher champions actually are asking high expectations from children with disabilities and are also clear on classroom rules. Because having a disability is not an excuse for not trying to reach your full potential. And of course, we need to be aware that disabilities are very different, and you have different levels of severity of disability. You don't expect the same things from a child with multiple intellectual and physical disabilities as a child that has mild Down syndrome or a child that has only a physical disability. So for some children you need to change methods in a classroom, like for children with intellectual disabilities. But if children with physical disability
Okay, we can continue. Okay, they say already connected, so you can continue what you say before.
Okay, thank you. That sometimes happens. So what I'm trying to explain is that we need to be aware that children with disabilities are as different from each other as any other group of children. You have very bright kids amongst children with disabilities, as you have very bright kids among other children. But you also have children who find learning, academic learning, very difficult, both children with and without disabilities. So we need to keep that in mind. I know that in Singapore they once did a small survey to find out how people react to disability. So people on the street were shown some pictures of children with disabilities. and some adults with disabilities, and they asked what they felt, how they reacted. And all those people reacted with, oh, I feel so sorry for these children. I think they will never be able to go to school. I think they will be very lonely. And then in this same program, they brought the children and the adults with disabilities to meet these people. Some of them had a PhD. So people with disabilities can also get PhDs. Some of them were working in a restaurant, or they were working in a sports organization, and some of the children and some of the adults were not so successful. But they all were talking about what they had learned in school, how they had benefited, how they had friends without disabilities. So I think it's important, and that's what our champions would like to showcase, is that it's not only learning to pass tests and exams that is important for children with and without disabilities. It is important to help children learn how to relate to each other, how to respect diversity, how to build friendships with different people, how to talk with each other and learn about different perspectives. So I think it's important that we look at what is education for, and how can we make diversity a resource for better education.
Ya, bagaimana juga teman-teman tadi sempat terputus jaringannya, tapi kita coba ulang lagi beberapa poin juga yang disampaikan oleh Els. Dan sekali lagi kita masih punya sekitar 20 menit, jadi jika teman-teman ada yang ingin ditanyakan, silahkan ditanyakan di section conversation. Els tadi juga bilang bahwa Els menyampaikan bahwa di beberapa negara seperti banyak orang yang melihat orang-orang dengan disabilitas itu lebih pada kelemahannya atau barriers yang dimilikinya atau hambatan yang dimilikinya, tapi sebenarnya tanpa kita sadari juga orang-orang dengan disabilitas itu juga mereka punya potensi, dan seharusnya kita yang bisa melihat potensi itu, dan orang-orang yang champion atau juara itulah yang sebenarnya bisa melihat potensi dan hak anak atau orang dengan disabilitas secara keseluruhan. Saya jadi ingat bagaimana Els menjawab pertanyaan ketika itu kami sedang melakukan diskusi dengan beberapa social worker, dan beberapa social worker itu nanya bagaimana untuk membuat orang tua dengan anak disabilitas mau menyekolahkan anaknya ke sekolah. Dan jawabannya cukup simpel. Kita cukup cari champion di sekitar kita, dan pasti ada orang tua yang berhasil menyekolahkan anaknya dan mengirim anaknya ke sekolah, dan anaknya kalau yang tadi sebagai contoh di Singapura, anaknya bahkan sampai PhD gitu. Dan sebenarnya itulah yang disebut champion. Jadi di tingkat yang lebih konkret, champion-champion inilah yang bisa membuat orang lain tergerak juga, bahwa ketika orang lain ragu untuk menyekolahkan anak disabilitasnya ke sekolah, tapi ketika orang tua itu melihat ada orang tua lain yang bisa menyekolahkan anaknya dengan kondisi yang sama, ya kenapa tidak kita juga bisa mengirimkan anak-anak di sekitar kita ke sekolah. Jadi find champion juga penting untuk yang pertama tadi sustainable project kita, dan juga untuk mendorong atau menginspirasi orang-orang yang ada di sekitar kita. So, Els, I already told that I remember when you answered the question related to parents who don't want to send their children to go to school, and you answered that just find the parents who successfully send their children to go to school and the effect of going to school for their children. So it's like finding the champion also can inspire other.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that is, I mean, I was talking about earlier, it's important to show and champion how to connect with children with different disabilities. Treat them with respect and listen to them, give them a voice, and try to understand them. Communication is very important. So again, you don't talk about the things that they don't know, but you talk about the things that they know, and you create opportunities for children to communicate by using different techniques. For some children that is through pictures, for other children that is through sign language. And these are important things that children and teachers need to learn at least the basics of. And they can find, again, champions amongst parents and siblings to help them do that. Again, the other important part is that we need to challenge children with disabilities so that they reach their full potential. But what is also important is that we are flexible and creative, because you want children with disabilities to follow the same basic curriculum in the school. So sometimes teachers need to adapt that a little bit. Maybe they need to simplify a text about Romeo and Juliet for some students who have intellectual disabilities. Or children are working in groups to do a role play, then these children need to learn how to make it adaptable for a child with autism to participate in the role play. So these are things that are very valuable skills, and some children have that naturally, and they are natural champions, and some adults also. And some other people, you need to showcase it to them, and then they get convinced, they see how other people do that, and they want to do it as well. So the last thing that I think is very important for champions, what champions show us, is collaboration. Teachers helping other teachers, parents helping teachers, children helping each other. I think we can't do this alone. We need those role models. We need to bounce off ideas. We need to learn about how other teachers are doing it. If they have had success in a classroom, then we need a whole school sitting together where that one teacher talks about the other teachers, how he or she has done that. The same can happen with parents. The same can happen with children. The same can happen with government officials, with organizations. So indeed, what you said earlier, we need to identify those champions, recognize them, and bring them out and help us to talk with others and convince them, look, I've done it like this. Maybe you could try that too. And if you need support, I can help you.
Ya, dan beberapa poin yang tadi Els sampaikan juga, yang pertama adalah kreatif. Bagaimana sebenarnya guru-guru juga bisa tidak terlalu kaku terutama dalam mengimplementasikan pendidikan inklusif, karena juga balik lagi kita harus melihat potensi yang dimiliki oleh anak tersebut. Jadi tidak bisa menyamakan semua anak, termasuk juga dalam proses pembelajaran dan capaian-capaian yang dimilikinya. Dan yang kedua adalah kolaborasi. Bagaimana sebenarnya collaboration ini jadi penting juga, karena kita nggak bisa melakukan mengimplementasikan pendidikan inklusif ini secara sendiri gitu. Kita butuh misalnya dari orang tua, dari guru, dan dari masyarakat, sehingga proses implementasi pendidikan inklusif juga bisa berjalan dengan baik. Dan sebelum kita, sudah ada beberapa pertanyaan yang masuk, dan sekali lagi untuk teman-teman yang masih punya pertanyaan, kita akan mungkin 15 menit ke depan kita akan masuk sesi tanya jawab. Jadi jika teman-teman ada yang ingin ditanyakan, bisa diketik di section conversation. So else, before we end talk about the champion and answer some question that we got in conversation section, so do you have anything to say before we answer that question?
I believe there are many out there who can be champions. I think what is very often important is that we get to know people with disabilities, interact with them, and are not afraid, and use the right language with them. I think that is important. I mean, it's similar to, for me, having lived in many different countries. In every country, I need to adapt. I need to look at the culture and how people treat each other and how people dress. So I need to respect that culture. I think in a similar way, we need to respect people with disabilities the way they are and value how they contribute, maybe in different ways. Maybe they need some adaptations, but they can all learn, they can all develop, they can all contribute to our societies. And that's kind of the message that I would like us all to take on board and start becoming champions ourselves, but also start recognizing those children, those parents, those teachers, those government officials who are already trying to promote inclusive education by exactly doing that and bringing them together. And maybe a next webinar could invite some of these champions that could talk to you about how they have become champions and what they do as champions. Thank you.
So sebenarnya juga bagaimana mengimplement. Kita sudah dapat beberapa pertanyaan yang nanti juga Els akan menjawab pertanyaannya dan masih terbuka untuk teman-teman yang ingin menanyakan. Tapi poin terakhir yang Els sampaikan adalah siapapun bisa menjadi champion, siapapun bisa menjadi juara, dan kita coba bantu, kita coba angkat juara-juara atau champion-champion dalam pendidikan inklusif di sekitar kita, sehingga mereka bisa kita bantu, suara mereka juga bisa kita dengar, dan dengan begitu juga mereka bisa menginspirasi orang-orang di sekitar mereka. So we're going to the last section of our discussion is about conversation. The first question is about the most challenges that you face during your work related to inclusive education, in implementing inclusive education.
That's a very interesting question and a very important question. I think my biggest challenge is that it goes so slow, that it takes so much time to change people's mindsets, that it takes so much time to change policies. And even if we have new policies, it takes so much time to implement new policies. So I think for me, I try to address that challenge by focusing on children, by giving children a choice and asking them about how they can support children with different abilities, children from very poor backgrounds, other children that are marginalized. So these discussions with children are very interesting. Children are very honest, very open, and they sometimes tell me that they would like to have a different kind of classroom, a different kind of teacher, different kind of lessons where they can work more together, where they can discuss more together, where they can learn about each other's backgrounds. And not so long ago, I was in a school where there was a child in a wheelchair and they were discussing their sports day. So there were 3 children with disabilities who said, why don't we organize the sports day and we will make all kind of barriers for you that are not so much barriers for us. So we are going to change around the sports day. So you will have to do a race in a wheelchair. You will have to do a game where you cannot hear anything. So, I mean, sometimes we also need to turn around some of the things that we do in schools to become aware of what it is like to have a barrier, to have a disability, so that we create more understanding. And I think what is also a bit challenging over the years is that we don't seem to appreciate diversity still enough. I don't see many teachers with disabilities in mainstream schools. I see them in some developing countries, not even in my own country. So I think sometimes it's also, for me, challenging to see that even in high-income countries like the Netherlands, which is my country, things are going very slow. And I would like to see that some of the things that is being done in countries like Indonesia and other developing countries or middle-income countries that are doing better than some of the high-income countries. So maybe we also need to create more linkages between countries so that they learn from each other and pick up the good practices like that.
So yeah, working with inclusive education is not only working with literally the children, but also the mindset of people around them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we got other question. Hello, I'm Reni, mother of cerebral palsy children. My son is 9 years old and is entering inclusive school in Yogyakarta. My son is mild CP and no non-verbal, so I'm also acting as his shadow teacher. I'm also a member of community of cerebral. Sorry. I'm also member of community of cerebral palsy parents in Yogyakarta. My problem that I knew from parents of CP, most of them would like to go to inclusive school, but not all school is willing to accept them, especially if the children is served CP. Most of the reason of the government school is they don't and oppose have the research to assist the children. They don't have the research. Uh, this is what happened in the society. So do you have any advice related to it?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And reading your question, I think you're one of my champions. The way you help your own child to go to school and be part of the community of parents with children with cerebral palsy. It's not always possible for parents to become kind of assistants in the school of their children, but if they can, I think that would provide a lot of support to teachers. And again, I mean, that's maybe part of all our challenges is that things go very slow. We know that special schools are supposed to become resource centers so that the inclusive government schools get more special support. At the same time, sometimes I think also we forget that there are a lot of support mechanisms in every school. Children can support children, teachers can support teachers, and parents can support schools, and schools can support parents. So it's also part of how the school leadership is working around these inclusion issues. If the school wants to show that they feel responsible for all the children in their catchment area, then they need to look at those different support structures that are already there in every school. So you can have a buddy system where children without disabilities have a schedule to support the child with cerebral palsy. And I've seen schools doing that, where the children without disabilities felt very proud of themselves because they had a schedule and every day it was another child who was responsible, and they were very proud of what they were doing with their classmate with cerebral palsy. It's very much about the leadership of a school. And we may do a lot of teacher training, but if our school leaders, our school principals are not convinced, then it's not going to happen. So maybe this is also something that we need to do as Save the Children, focus more on the school leaders together with the local government. I think it's important that you keep trying and that parents have their own group and do advocacy with the local government officials, because I have understood that no school is allowed to refuse a child. But at the same time, if a child goes to a school where it's not supported, then the child will not benefit. So we need to do a lot of advocacy together. And maybe this is also something then for Save the Children, to partner more with parent associations to help them advocate for their children in inclusive schools?
Yeah, let's go the way how children can support children, teacher can support teacher, and parents also can support the school. And the the problem that you face related to some schools or government school, say they didn't want to have children with disability, especially CP, maybe because they didn't know there is a special school that can be a resource center for them. So we go to another opinion of our participants. Uh, they say he agreed that all of us can be a champion. So I have opinion. Nobody will have disability if have access and accessible to achieve dreams. What do you think about it?
That's very true, very wise. No, I think the fact that we talk about disabilities is a bit disrespectful. I think if I look at my own son, I don't see him as a person with a disability, although he has difficulties with social interaction and things like that. But I see him with a lot of abilities. It's just different. I mean, the way he learned in school was not the same as a typical child who learns in school. So I think all children can learn. All children with different disabilities can learn. They just learn in a different way. But we are so stuck on everything being standardized. We have standard teaching methods, standard curricula, standard textbooks, standard test methods, but standard children do not exist. So I think it's important that we become more flexible to diversity issues. I remember when I visited one of your schools that the teacher said it's maybe not so much the children with disabilities who are difficult to include, because we have all feelings of empathy for children with disabilities. It's more children who are coming from poor backgrounds, who can maybe not wash themselves every day, who maybe smell a little bit. Those are children who are being bullied and teased in the schools. So by focusing on children with disabilities, we should not forget about other children who may be excluded or marginalized from the school, or when they are in school, within the school. So maybe we should stop talking about disabilities or special needs. Every child is an individual, is unique, and they all have their own learning strengths and learning weaknesses, and therefore they all have their individual support needs. Maybe that's how we should look at education, and we should look at every single child.
Yeah, we also got question from entity. Uh,
Hi, Els.
Yeah, hi Els. So talking about a champion and inclusive education. Actually, some teacher in Belu, Atambua, they already implement inclusive education, even with limited skills that they have. Uh, they already assist children with disability in their school, and there is a good significant result. But he has a question: is there any like anything we can do to the champion? Because also like he think that giving some skills to champion also important,
Absolutely.
not only bring them up and make them as inspiration, but also like giving them capacity, like skill, or so we can share the skill or the new knowledge to them. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it would be interesting to look at the different project areas, at the communities, community leaders, at the parents, at the schools, at your local government officials, and identify some of your champions and bring them together and see whether they can support each other and build each other's capacity. But at the same time, I think your champion teachers should not only share and inspire the other teachers, they should also be able to further grow as champions. So if we can create opportunities where teachers meet and teachers share each other's knowledge and approaches to inclusive education, I think you will generate a lot of more knowledge and skills. And of course, people from different other projects in Save the Children or other organizations, or even from some of the teacher training colleges, could also be brought in and help us to further develop our champions. I think it would be interesting to see whether we could also video document some of our champions, especially the teachers, how they are doing that, because I get really excited when you say that in a school in Belo, even without training and enough resources, they are doing it already. And those are very often the most powerful champions because they believe in what they do. So maybe we should also look at how can we not only further support them, but also document what they do and use that for other teachers to learn from.
Yeah. That's the way actually we can bring up and also document the champion. So it's not only make people around them inspired, but also like people around across Indonesia also being inspired by the champion that we have. And I'm very impressed the way people in Belu, Atambua, the teacher, even with limited skill that they have and also limited access that they have, they still assist children with disability. They can see children, the right of children with disability. That's the way we also really want to talk about the champion itself. So we also have another question. I have a question regarding to government support toward those parents in remote area with unlimited resources and support. How can parents support their children when there is no resource to support the children? For example, parents who has a boy which like impairment, but the boy really like to go to school, but unfortunately they need like something helping him to go to school. Local government don't have any support as limited budget and research, including lacking of understanding of inclusive.
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I think that's in many countries in Asia a big issue. There may be a community school, but the community school may not be able to provide resources to adapt the school program to a child with different disabilities. I'm just wondering whether there could be something around online support courses, maybe linking with some international organizations like Save the Children, but not only Save the Children, because other organizations are also working on inclusive education. But I think it's important to try to make a link with, if the local government can't help, with some of the international organizations and see whether online support can be one option for at least preparing the child and preparing the school for inclusion. Maybe we could look at the nearest special school, but if you say this is a remote area, the special school is likely to be far away as well. But I mean, this is something that an organization like Save the Children should be interested in. And I'm really glad that you bring this up, because we say in our mission statement that we are trying to reach the most disadvantaged children. And you are actually talking about one of the most disadvantaged children, because it's not only the disability that creates a barrier, but also the fact that the child lives in a remote area is an additional barrier. So I would say maybe you should get in touch with one of the international organizations and see what is possible. I would be very interested to hear whether we can follow up on this somehow.
Yeah, so we don't have any question anymore, and also the time already 4 is already an hour that when we start this discussion. So we will put our video on YouTube, so everyone who missed our discussion can follow us on Facebook. We'll upload it maybe tomorrow, so just wait. Thank you for sharing, Els. We are glad to having you here, and thank you for the attendants who participate in this discussion. So before we close our discussion, do you have a closing statement?
Thank you for having me, and please keep in touch. I think it's very important to keep the discussion going, find our champions, link champions with people who need to be supported, who need to find out how things can be developed in a different way. And I really hope that a next webinar will bring in some speakers who are champions for us, who can tell from their own experience how they have done this, because that would be very powerful for other people to hear about. Thank you very much.
Ya, terima kasih atas partisipasinya. Selamat sore dan salam dari kantor Save the Children Central Area di Bandung.